up, guys? The Bench Buddies are back with our college football Week 5 Top 25. As always, I got Ty with me, our college analyst. And, we had a lot of shakeups in this week's rankings. Some teams moving, even in the top 5 as well, top 10 especially. And we do have 3 new teams entering those rankings. But before we get into it, hit that subscribe button, get us to 200 subscribers. We'll be doing that giveaway. But before we talk about those teams moving in, Ty, which one of these teams are you kind of surprised that really fell from the rankings?
Surprised. I guess I'll say Miami because no one really saw them losing this week. Getting kind of blown out really by Middle Tennessee, just really embarrassing. Middle Tennessee is not like a really good group of 5 team either. They're pretty bad this year. So I'm not sure what's going on there, but it's back to the drawing board for Miami.
And I agree, with Miami, that was kind of weird loss. I mean, Texas, same thing. The Texas team could be 4-0 right now. And those 2 losses are a matter of 4 points. So just, different possessions and different games, could result in some different winnings. But in the others receiving votes, obviously we do still have Florida and Texas there. But obviously the 2 Kansas teams and Cincinnati still getting some love. But obviously, I'll let you talk about Kansas because it's hard, seeing just Kansas up there.
Kansas can score points. People are going to have to start taking them a little bit seriously now. They're 4-0. They have a good road win at Houston where they put up 48. So they can score points. It's just, I don't know if their defense is going to hold up when the competition gets better, but it's more wins than they've had since, I want to say, 2009. So it's a crazy good season already for Kansas.
And then I'll let you start here at 25 with the Syracuse Orange.
Yep, Syracuse, a team no one really expected much out of this year, but a 4-0 start, hung on for a win against Virginia. And this week they have Wagner, so they should be 5-0. They have already a really exciting win over Purdue. So this team has won a couple close games. They've been tested in that manner. But we'll see if they can keep it going once they play the Clemsons and the NC States of their conference. But right now, underrated team.
24, we have another team that wasn't ranked last week, and the Florida State Seminoles came to play. But this is where we're going to see where they're made of this week against Wake Forest at home, if they do play, depending on the hurricane status. But this team, 12 rushing touchdowns in 4 games, so averaging 3 a game. They scored 31 in the first half, and that's their most since 2013, where they won the Natty. And Jordan Travis, I think he's, a great game manager for the Seminole team. Obviously, they like to run the ball a lot, so he's good at doing his job, making the plays to just keep them moving down the field. On the Seminole team, if they walk away with the win here against Wake Forest, they will for sure be probably in the top 15 next week.
All right, at 23, we got Pittsburgh, who has rebounded with 2 wins since their loss to Tennessee. This week should be another easy win against a really bad Georgia Tech team. So they should be getting to 4-1. I think this team still could compete in the ACC. We've seen Clemson already struggle a little bit, so I don't think they're going to quite run away with it like they have in years past. So I think Pitt really has a chance to potentially repeat as ACC champions, but obviously a lot of room for improvement still if they're going to get there.
22, we got the BYU Cougars. And well, just another ho-hum victory against Wyoming, which was kind of surprising that it was a 2-possession game. But, they finally got the ground game going, 188 yards, and this is a run-first team. So it's good to see them, sticking to their game plan here. But Jaron Hall, really went off, 26-32, a little over 304 tutties. They need that play from him consistently. And, being an independent team, this BYU team has some tough games remaining on that schedule. So they could be that, non-conference Power 5 team that gets into that New Year's Six Bowl if they, win a few more games here.
All right, Minnesota jumps into the rankings at number 21. I absolutely dominated Michigan State as I was watching that game. Just crazy stat after crazy stat was popping up on the Big Ten Network score bug. Total yards at one point was like 220 to 1. Just crazy stats and a crazy domination for Minnesota, outgaining them 508 to 240. Just every aspect of that game was dominated by the Gophers. So I think they definitely deserve a ranking. Obviously, It's probably more to do with the struggles that Michigan State has coming. But still, a dominant win on the road against a team who was borderline top 10 to start the season is really impressive, no matter how you look at it. So Minnesota in the rankings.
20, we got the Sooners dropping 10 spots, and probably one of the biggest drops we've seen this year. And that's just in part to the unexpected loss. Kansas State has had their number the last 4 years, but I think out of all the years, this was probably the year where they would get over that hump and take it to the next level. But Dylan Gabriel, I mean, he did his part, but in the end, it just wasn't enough for the Sooners team. The defense obviously let them down yet again. That seems like it's the story every year for Oklahoma. When they lose games, it's because they give up too many points, not because the offense failed them. Putting up 34 points in a game, especially college, is a hard thing to do, honestly. But this team, just couldn't get it done against Kansas State. And, that Kansas State team has shown that they are a good team. They did lose to Tulane earlier this year, so that's a little sketchy there. But, obviously Big 12 play, things change. And we're going to see if this Oklahoma team can rebound against a 3-0 TCU team.
All right, 19, we got Arkansas dropping 8 spots. Tough loss to Texas A&M. You saw that field goal hit right off the top of the upright. Really tough way for them to go down. This week they welcome Alabama, so you got to get right off the mat. Otherwise, it's going to be a tough week for them. So we'll see if they can bounce back. I think they're getting like 16, 17 points. So nobody's expecting them to compete this week. Maybe that gives them a chip on the shoulder, but we'll see. KJ Jefferson struggled a lot throwing the ball. I know he had 171 yards, but not much going in the passing game for Arkansas. And the defense obviously is not going to be any easier this week with Alabama. So things they need to figure out. Otherwise, they'll be sitting at 3-2.
18th, we got the Texas A&M Aggies, who moved up a little bit after that Arkansas win. I just couldn't move myself to move them, above 15 with that one loss. It's kind of tough to do. They deserve to move up a little bit. It was more than likely, probably they were going to lose this game. They should have lost this game, I think, personally. Max Johnson personally didn't play well either. 11 for 21, nothing spectacular. And I think when they start playing the big dogs, Georgia, Alabama, maybe you can even throw Tennessee in that conversation this year too. And I think it's really going to show how weak this Texas A&M team is. They've had some close calls already, obviously lost 2. And I just think this team is going to, fumble out later in the season.
All right, Wake Forest drops only 4 spots, obviously competed till the very end with Clemson taking them to 2 overtimes before eventually going down at home. I think this was Wake Forest game to lose, really. If you watch the second half, they scored to take the lead 3 different times, let Clemson come back and tie it. So I think the game was really in their hands, and they'll be kicking themselves after losing this one. It's just the defense. There was the same story last year. The defense just can't hold up their end. Sam Hartman throws 6 touchdowns and they still lose. That's got to be really disappointing for the Deacons. So this week going into Florida State, it doesn't get any easier. That's another really tough game for them. But season's really on the line here. If you lose this game, playoff chances are gone. So they got to bounce back.
16, we got Oregon moving up after a gutty win at Washington State. This team couldn't score for anything the first 3 quarters and put up 29 in the fourth to get that win on the road. Bo Nix looked, pretty bad in the first half, throwing that pick 6 right before half. And I'm like, oh, this might be an upset here. But Oregon came back, did their thing in the fourth quarter. And I think the big thing that, goes unnoticed in this comeback is when Washington State was up, they still held them to only 41 rushing yards this whole game. And obviously when you're up, you want to run the ball, keep the clock moving and whatnot. But this Ducks team did a great job stopping them, having 3 and outs galore in the second half to really give themselves a chance to win. And that's what they did.
All right, Washington up into the top 15. Easy win over Stanford. And this team is really looking a lot better on offense than they were last year. This team could not move the ball at all a year ago, but Michael Penix Jr., another 300-yard game, his 2nd in a row. He has so far proved to be the answer for them at quarterback, and offense looks like it's flowing much better. So this week, a tough test at UCLA. There's probably going to be 10,000 people there maybe. So
Maybe.
Not the most difficult place to play, but still a test for the Huskies. But if they can get through that, then this is a team that could compete for sure in the Pac-12. It's got to be one of the more wide open years in that conference. So watch out for Washington.
14, we got the Baylor Bears escaping Ames and getting a good road win. That Iowa State team, if they would have won, more than likely they would have been ranked, being undefeated. But they escaped there and got a win. I mean, the only positive I think you can take out of this one, they held them to 67 rushing yards. The defense was great. Blake Shapen obviously had a great game as well, 3 touchdowns. But now, how do you respond? A home game against Oklahoma State. And, as you were saying about Wake Forest, this is kind of similar situation. You lose this game, your college football chances are done. Oklahoma State, though, they're looking to get revenge on last year's Big 12 championship where they got stopped at the 1-yard line. So obviously Baylor knows that revenge is on their mind, and let's see if they can pull it off here.
All right, Ole Miss up 1 spot to 13. Very underwhelming win last week against Tulsa, where it came down to one possession. They had to get one more first down there at the end of the game just to ice it. So not the dominant performance you would have expected there. And they haven't really had any dominant performances to start the year. So that's concerning. I think the offense needs to find a flow like they had last year. Jackson Dart still figuring things out. Another lackluster performance out of him. So this week they got to get that position figured out with Kentucky. Otherwise, they won't be able to keep up because that team can definitely score with anyone. So that's a really big game this week. And Ole Miss, the running backs are doing well, but if they can't get production out of Dart, then I don't see them winning that game.
12, we got the NC State Wolfpack moving up a big amount here, mostly because a lot of teams are falling in the mid, range here. But they went off 29 first downs, never punted, almost 500 total yards. They got that 13-game winning streak at home, which is 5th longest in the FBS. And Devin Leary had a great game other than his 1 interception. But we finally get to see what this Wolfpack team is made of. Obviously, we saw week 1, the close call against East Carolina. And since that time, I think this team has just evolved and really learned from that. And we're going to see what they have and if they can go on the road and shock Clemson.
All right, Penn State up 5 spots, number 11, same deal, just a lot of teams losing. Kind of like Ole Miss, a lackluster performance, but you can cut them a little slack. They're coming off a blowout win in SEC country, so maybe a little letdown in the first half. But they seem to have it figured out in the running game. The offensive line looks much improved from last year, and this team has a lot of really good athletes. So I think they're really underrated and a team that potentially could beat an Ohio State or a Michigan this season. So I think you got to watch out for them in the Big Ten East. It's a 3-team race this year, not just a 2-team race.
Starting off our top 10, we have Utah moving down a spot, mostly in part to some teams jumping them. Good win on the road at Arizona State. Obviously, Arizona State went through some things last week with Herm Edwards firing. But, they came out and pretty much showed that they were the dominant team from the start. They do have a little tough test against Oregon State, a better competition this week. They probably shouldn't lose that game. But this Utah team has looked much better since that Florida loss week 1. And Cameron Rising has played out of his mind. Obviously, he still needs to cut back on those interceptions a little bit. But this Utah team still could be a dark horse team. A lot of people wrote him off after week 1. To win the Pac-12, but obviously that wasn't a Pac-12 loss at the beginning of the year, so this team still could go undefeated in the Pac-12 and possibly sneak into the playoff conversation.
All right, Tennessee coming in at number 9. They finally beat Florida, first time in 6 years. Made it a little closer than it should have been at the end, but they still get the win. And Hendon Hooker is looking like a potential Heisman candidate, throwing for almost 350 and 2 touchdowns, running for another 100 yards and a touchdown. He is the answer for Tennessee. This is what they've been waiting for all these years is solid quarterback play, and they're getting that and then some this season. That offense can score with anybody. It's just whether the defense can hold up against Alabama or Georgia this year. But I think they're going to be a threat. They have Alabama at home this year. I think that they have a chance to potentially pull that upset. But for now, they're 4-0. In the top 10 and one of the most potent offenses in the country.
Nothing much to be said about this Oklahoma State team. Obviously, they were on a bye last week, so they're getting a little healthier, game planning for this Baylor team. And, toughest test of the year here so far, 3-0, going on the road at Baylor, looking to get revenge, as I said earlier. And if they can do that, I think you might be looking almost at a top 5 team here next week.
All right, Kentucky up to number 7, and similar to Ole Miss, and they play each other this week, but similar to them, an 8-point underwhelming win. For them, it was against a MAC team. They've had 2 of these in a row, really underwhelming performances after that big win at Florida. So I don't know if they're still coming down from that high, but they got to get it figured out fast now going into Ole Miss, a really tough road game. And they got to play like that number 7 ranking this week, or they're going to see themselves falling quite a bit here in the rankings. Will Levis still holding up his end. Running game is really struggling, and the defense needs to figure things out going into this Ole Miss game.
At 6, we have USC dropping a spot after that super close call at Oregon State. And now they have Arizona State this week, which should be another Caleb Williams, just absolute domination. But, it is a concern there as USC had their first true test on the road. And it is a little bit eye-opening there for that USC Trojan team. Obviously, they don't really have any tough games here for the next week or 2. And I think this team, is looking at a 5-0 start for sure. And we'll be going in next week, kind of seeing how this team performs.
All right, we got our Michigan Wolverines dropping a spot this week. Another team with an underwhelming performance. For them, it was against Maryland. I do think Maryland is an improved team this year. They're going to win 7, 8, maybe even 9 games. So it's not the Maryland of old, but still, they need to get things figured out. 27 points is way too much for the defense to be given up. And when you're seeing teams like Penn State and Ohio State here coming up, that can't happen in the future. So things to figure out for Michigan. Obviously, Blake Corum was unbelievable, 240 yards on the ground, just an absolute workhorse. But some questionable play calling throughout that game and some questionable blown coverages that they'll have to get figured out going forward.
And at 4, making that big leap into the top 5, we got the Clemson Tigers with a thrilling overtime victory at Wake Forest. But how do they respond this week? With a home game against 12 NC State. So, the punches just keep on coming to dethrone the ACC favorites. But I think if you look back at it, this is Clemson just not giving up. You said it earlier for Wake Forest. They were down 3 separate times in the second half, came back, tied it right away, had an answer every single time. And they got the last laugh where Clemson, had to answer first, and Wake Forest couldn't answer back. But DJ, he's finally playing like the quarterback we thought he would play. Like, he did struggle a little bit early, but now we really know he can be a great big game play caller with those 5 touchdowns. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how NC State fares with this Clemson team, just because Clemson can put up a lot of points, but they can also give it up. This isn't the same Clemson's defense we've seen in previous years. And that's a good thing, for other ACC competitors.
All right, number 3, we have Ohio State, just absolute domination over Wisconsin. I don't know if that's more to do with them or the Badgers' struggles, but just an absolute domination. This offense looks like they could score on basically anybody right now. Not much else to be said. Led 28-0 very early in the game. This game was basically over after 1 quarter. So the Buckeyes are just coasting. They put up 77 the previous week against Toledo. So the offense is hitting on all cylinders, and this is without Jackson Smith and Jigba. So once he comes back, you'd expect them to make another leap. So if the defense can improve at all, really, from last year, I think this is clearly a playoff team, and it's going to be really tough for our Wolverines to beat them for a second time.
At 2, we got the Crimson Tide coming off a cupcake victory against a Vanderbilt team that surprisingly had a winning record at this point. So it looks better on paper for Alabama. But this week, they have their first or second true test on the road at Arkansas, coming off of that loss. And I think they're looking to, really give it to Alabama. Everyone's trying to dethrone the champ, with Alabama. And, it's possible. But if Vanderbilt's, giving up 628 yards on offense to Alabama, just imagine what these, better defenses in the SEC are going to be happy about. Probably giving up 400 plus, limiting them. But if Bryce Young can keep playing how he's playing and not have a Texas game where he, magically has some good plays to really seal a win and escape. This Alabama team is looking at a matchup against Georgia in the SEC championship.
And with that, we have Georgia at number 1. Kind of a dicey game. Actually a little competitive with Kent State, kind of until the very end. Only winning by 17. They only led 12-10 at one point. But we're going to give them a pass because of their complete domination of Oregon, who is actually turning out to be a pretty good team, and their complete domination of South Carolina on the road. So you put up 2 performances like that, I think you get a pass for a lackluster performance like this. And we were just saying all of the top 3 have a bad game this year. Alabama against Texas, Ohio State against Notre Dame. So they stay here at number 1. They have Missouri this week. That should be a game where they can get back on track, absolutely steamroll them like they have South Carolina and Oregon. So I think nothing to worry about yet for Georgia. I still think they're the best team in the country, and I think that defense will be just fine. So we'll keep them here at number 1.
And, something to add too is, we were mentioning all these top 3 with that game. These 3 are also interchangeable too, because I think Georgia has the slight edge, but then again, Bama just put up 55 and only gave up 3. You saw Ohio State absolutely throttle Wisconsin early. And they had their Notre Dame game where they came back and had to win that one. But these 3 teams, if you look at the AP poll, they're pretty much the same thing, super close. I think Ohio State's only 2 points behind Alabama. And it's kind of the same here for us. We had different thoughts, but we just decided to leave it just because everyone's had that one game this year. But going forward, with some SEC play heating up and Big Ten play heating up as well, this could be changing here within the next few weeks. But that is going to be it for the video today. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button as always. But until the next time, the Bench Buddies are out.
She never called back.